London, one of the world's great capital cities. Over 8.5 million people and rising live within its 660 square miles. Transport for London is the public body responsible for the entire public transport network, as well as 5% of its roads. There are over 30 million journeys made every day across the TfL network, of which around 13 million alone are on public transport. The Tube had its busiest day ever earlier this year in October, when around 5 million people used it in a single day. Keeping London moving is a big challenge for TfL, and technology is at the heart of its operations.
You might say that every business is a technology business involved in some other things as well, and that's true of us as well. But technology is also driving new business processes, and the biggest example of that in London is the advent of contactless bank cards that are now being used for fare collection instead of a ticket.
Contactless card payments have further reduced queues in stations as fewer commuters use a machine to pay for their ticket.
We came to the very simple realization that nobody wants to buy a ticket, and actually we don't want to sell them one either, because everyone's got a bank card in their pocket, and if you could just accept the thing that's in everyone's pocket for fare collection, it would mean that it would liberate them from the whole task of fare collection.
One of the biggest challenges for London's transport network over the next few years is the capital's rapidly rising population. The solution for TfL could lie in the use of big data and analytics.
We're now actively using data for network planning, for giving customers better information, but also to make operational decisions that allow the network to revert back to a normal state very quickly after a disruption. The best example that we have of where we've exploited big data is in the planning of our bus networks and our interchanges. For decades, this work was done by very small survey samples, where we would go and ask people what journeys they were making. We get millions and millions of data points automatically every day, where we would get very few data points through a survey very expensively.
TfL also has an open data policy. Rather than introduce its own journey planning applications, it shares its data with the market. But does the sharing of data make TfL vulnerable to a cyber attack?
It's not that we don't get attacked, we get attacked like everyone else. But we have a high degree of security around all of our data. That means that people can't exploit it easily. We do hold a vast quantity of data, and we understand the responsibility that comes with holding that kind of data. But the data is also very powerful, and which is why we use it to make better decisions.
Several studies this year claim London has the most expensive public transport fares in the world. TfL has just announced fare increases for next year, but is it providing value for money?
I have to say the trains are fairly regular and quite reliable. It's more just the sheer volume of passengers, really.
I think it's a bit too expensive for what it is, really.
When you're comparing to other places, it's extortionate, but you wouldn't get very far if you kept doing that if you wanted to be in London, would you?
The UK has a very different model of funding public transport, with much more of the cost of running public transport coming from the fares itself. Other countries tend to support the public transport system more by subsidies. In the UK, the expectation is that the public transport system should break even on its own by just the fare income and by other income like property and advertising, which we also exploit aggressively. But we need the investment, and the money has to come from somewhere.
I think there's no doubt that TfL has led the way when it comes to technology, especially when you look at things like smart ticketing and contactless payments. It's really led the way in Europe and over the world, actually. But that comes at a cost. The London's transport public system is one of the most expensive in the world, and I think a lot of people feel like they're not getting the most value for that amount of money that they're spending. TfL's obviously got big issues coming up. We're seeing congestion on the roads and on the tube and bus networks. We're also having to deal with a rapidly growing population in London, and that causes issues. And it's whether really TfL can actually respond to that and has enough investment to be able to solve those problems.
The burden on London's commuters is growing as the city's population continues to expand. TfL has been innovative in its use of technology to keep people moving across the network as quickly as possible. But this all comes at a considerable cost to the passenger, and the way that TfL is funded means fares are unlikely to go down anytime soon. Daniel Garrahan, Financial Times, London.